The Potter and the Shepherd. A story of Elara. An inspiring story from the book of Psalm 23. The city was a symphony of clamor, a relentless tide of ambition and anxiety. Elara, a ceramist whose hands usually found solace in the cool, yielding clay, now felt them clench, dry and useless. Her small studio, once her sanctuary, felt like a cage. Bills stacked like unglazed pottery, commissions dried up, and the vibrant colors she once envisioned now bled into shades of gray. She was lost, adrift in a concrete ocean, and the whispered promise of her childhood, Psalm 23, felt like a distant, forgotten lullaby. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." Elara scoffed softly, a dry, humorless sound. Want was all she knew. Want for inspiration, for money, for peace. Her spirit, once as fluid as the clay on her wheel, was now brittle, cracking under the pressure of survival. One particularly brutal afternoon, after a gallery rejected her latest, most heartfelt collection, Elara walked past a small, overgrown park she'd never noticed before. The city's roar seemed to dim slightly as she pushed through a creaking iron gate. Inside, ancient oak trees formed a canopy, and a small neglected fountain trickled water into a mossy basin, almost still. She sank onto a weathered bench, the silence a balm. A tiny brave patch of clover pushed through a crack in the pavement near her feet. It was a minuscule green pasture in the heart of the urban jungle, and the fountain's murmur was a whisper of still waters. For the first time in months, the tightness in her chest eased. It wasn't a grand miracle, no voice from the heavens, just a quiet, unbidden sense of a breath being drawn. "He mocketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters." A single tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. It wasn't a tear of sadness, but of release. Something stirred within her, a faint ember of hope, a memory of a peace she thought she'd forgotten. The next few weeks were a slow, arduous climb. She started with small steps. Instead of forcing herself to create, she cleaned her studio, sweeping away the dust and the residue of despair. She allowed herself to sit by the fountain, to simply be. She picked up an old half-finished bowl, its rough edges a mirror of her soul. Instead of casting it aside, she began to smooth it, gently, patiently. "He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake." The path wasn't straight, nor was it paved with gold. It was a winding, often confusing route. There was still rent to pay, still the gnawing uncertainty. But now, when a challenge arose, an unexpected kindness would appear. A neighbor offered her a batch of fresh bread. A former classmate shared a job lead for a small festival stall, just enough to cover her bills for a month. These weren't grand gestures, but they felt like gentle nudges, guiding her, showing her a way forward she hadn't seen. Her soul wasn't instantly whole, but it was being restored, piece by careful piece. She felt a quiet strength, an inner compass recalibrating. Then came the storm. A freak accident in the dilapidated studio building, a burst pipe above her unit, sent water cascading down, ruining years of her collected work, her half-finished pieces, even her precious kiln. The smell of damp clay and shattered dreams filled the air. She stood amidst the wreckage, water pooling around her feet, and a primal scream caught in her throat. This wasn't just a setback. It was annihilation. This was the end. "Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me, thy rod and thy staff they comfort me." Elara fell to her knees amongst the broken shards, tears mingling with the muddy water. This was the valley. This was the shadow. And in that darkest, most desolate moment, something extraordinary happened. It wasn't a booming voice, not a blinding light. It was a profound, undeniable sense of presence. A warmth enveloped her, not physical, but deeply spiritual, as if strong unseen arms were holding her. The fear, so cold and sharp moments before, began to recede, replaced by an inexplicable calm. She looked at a piece of a shattered bowl, the one she'd been smoothing. It was irrevocably broken. Yet, in that moment, she saw not an end, but a beginning. A whisper, clear as a mountain spring, formed in her mind. "I am with you. Always." It wasn't just a memory of a verse. It was a living truth, breathed into her very being. The rod of protection, the staff of guidance. They were not just words, but a tangible comfort that held her together when she literally felt herself falling apart. God wasn't just a concept. He was real, a shepherd standing with her in the deepest, darkest valley. The insurance claim was a nightmare. But a small, unexpected grant for artists who had suffered major losses came through. It wasn't much, but it was enough to rent a tiny temporary space and buy a used kiln. She started over, but this time, something was different. She began to repair the broken ceramics, not trying to hide the cracks, but celebrating them. She learned about kintsugi, the Japanese art of mending broken pottery with lacquer dusted with powdered gold, making the repair an integral, beautiful part of the object's history. She saw the beauty in her own brokenness, and how God had mended her, filling her cracks with his golden grace. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Her enemies, self-doubt, financial anxiety, the fear of failure, still lingered, whispering from the edges of her consciousness. But now they no longer held power. She was creating art that was more authentic, more profound than ever before. Her kintsugi pieces, each with its golden seams telling a story of breakage and restoration, began to attract attention. A prominent gallery, the very one that had rejected her before, saw her new work and was captivated. They didn't just offer her an exhibition. They championed her story. Her head felt anointed, not with oil, but with a renewed sense of purpose and divine favor. Her cup, once empty, now overflowed with gratitude, creativity, and an unshakable peace. She was not just surviving, she was thriving, enjoying a feast of blessings even as the echoes of past struggles reminded her of the journey. Elara's studio, now larger and filled with light, no longer felt like a cage but a temple. She taught classes, sharing not just her skill with clay, but her story, her golden repairs. She saw others broken and searching, find hope in the beauty of mended things. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. The city still roared, but Elara no longer felt lost in it. She walked with a quiet confidence, knowing that the shepherd was not just a historical figure or a metaphor, but an ever-present reality. His goodness and mercy weren't just abstract concepts. They were the fabric of her days, weaving through her highs and her lows, her triumphs and her challenges. She understood now that the house of the Lord wasn't just a place in the afterlife, but a state of being, a dwelling in his constant presence, a sanctuary built not of bricks and mortar, but of trust, faith, and the profound, living reality of a shepherd who never leaves his sheep, even when they walk through the deepest, darkest valley. God wasn't just real. He was the most real thing she had ever known.